ESPN, celebrating 150 years of college football.
We all take for granted now that the NFL is the biggest dog out there.
And this is coming home to St. Louis.
But don't forget, college football had a 50-year head start.
What made college football different from professional football, in a single phrase, would be college spirit. Professional football was not respected.
But the college all-star game helped legitimize pro football.
For Bert Bell, he recognized that television could make people more interested in pro football than in college football.
65,000 are in Yankee Stadium.
And it had captivated the attention of the country.
So there was no combine. There was no interviews. It's changed quite a bit.
Essentially, college football is a developmental league for the NFL, operated free of charge to the NFL.
The Arizona Cardinals select Kyler Murray.
The difference between the NFL and college football, one's a business and one is a lowercase r religion. And I'm not sure if it's lowercase r.
The American Game, presented by Cintas.
Football itself is pure Americana. Whether it's college, the NFL, it's really a part of our American culture.
Bill Osmanski lugging the oval. He's traveling for the touchdown. Watch George Wilson toss the block.
The NFL started as a business to make money. College football started as this organic thing, a game of rugby more or less, on the pitches of all these schools, and they loved it. In 1895, the Midwestern college presidents, they can't stand this game. So what do? If we can't stop the damn thing, we might as well at least try to control it. So they meet at the Palmer House Hotel on State Street in Chicago, 7 university presidents of the current Big Ten, and they decided then and there to combine these two things, academics and athletics. That is huge. It is the first academically based athletic conference in the world. We are the only culture that ever seriously combines these things.
65,000 in Michigan Stadium at Ann Arbor. See the Wolverines of Michigan.
College football held on to its traditions and its allegiance to alma mater, and these were all things that the pros didn't have. What the pros had was just football itself. The early professionals were not just shunned, they were despised. They were resented as a threat to the pure college game. Mostly they were thought of as, violating the spirit of the true college game.
New Rockne at one point said pro football justifies defeat.
Or they feel sorry for themselves. No, I don't know where they've gotten that spirit, but that certainly is not the spirit of football.
And it took a long time for pro football to overcome that.
What made college football different from professional football, in a single phrase, would be college spirit. The idea that you're playing for the glory of alma mater, not for some kind of filthy lucre.
Jim Thorpe, All-American, the man of bronze who became the greatest athlete of all time.
Jim Thorpe is a curious character. He was a natural athlete. He didn't so much believe in training. He didn't so much believe in, a lot of the fame and the notoriety that came with being a great Olympic champion and a great football champion. And he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. But what he did need to do was make a living. American Indian kids frequently were not even allowed to have their own money. They didn't trust Indians to manage themselves. And at Carlisle, one of the things that he learned playing for Pop Warner was that if you're a really great athlete, some of those things became available. The Carlisle Indians were big box office. They're not the winningest team in football, but they were the most popular team in football. People just packed them in. I mean, the money came pouring in. He had some cash in his pocket for the first time. He had a decent suit of clothes for the first time. It was entertainment, and Thorpe really understood that, in some ways it was a show. as much as it was a game.
You always keep your eye on the ball.
He would do kicking exhibitions and other sorts of things that would show off his prowess with the football.
So when he played pro football and made no bones about adhering to the amateur ideal, in fact, his Olympic medals were stripped from him because he ignored the amateur ideal. He didn't have a problem with being paid. He wanted to be paid.
A shrine to the memory of the greats of professional football is dedicated in Canton, Ohio. It was here that the National Football League was founded in 1920 to start the pro game on its road to glory. The building domed like an
In 1920, when the National Football League was finally created, they were just these clubs that had been hiring former college players to come play and paying some locals, and they existed primarily, as, something to represent the town that the townsfolk could bet on. Professional football was for bettors. Professional football was not just different from college football, it was horribly lesser than college football in the minds of most fans.
Making a living and making muscle was the reward reaped by Red Grange from this summer's sideline as he prepped to hit the fall headline as one of the greatest football players of all time.
The attraction of seeing Red Grange in the flesh. I mean, people wanted to see him. And this was an iconic American hero during the golden age of sport. Red Grange was one of those names in the 20s, like Babe Ruth, like Bobby Jones. Red Grange was an iconic American college football star.
No mention of 1925 would be complete without
number 77
of Illinois,
Harold Red Grange, known as the Galloping Goat, one of the greatest football players of all time.
dancing, weaving,
Fast, elusive, and powerful.
another dazzling touchdown. The most colorful of footballers in the most colorful of eras, Red Grange
Will never be forgotten.
Time after time, Grange breaks through for long gains. The crowd screams for more. The Galloping Ghost gives it to them.
Making a living and making muscle.
Another touchdown by Red
Grange of Illinois. A marked man in every game, but in every game he made his mark. Fans yelled their heads off for Red Grange.
I scored 4 touchdowns in the first 12 minutes.
40 yards around left end before being down.
No one has ever equaled his record of yardage gained by rushing.
the best broken field runner of all time.
The all-time All-American, Red Grange.
The huge disruption to that came in 1925 when Red Grange turned pro, signed with the Chicago Bears, you know, right after finishing his senior season.
What did the signing of Grange mean to your team and to professional football?
He gave professional football its first impetus, and he really did a great job.
Thousands who had never heard of pro football packed the stadiums to get a glimpse of the ghost.
There was just, you know, uproar in the press, you know, a lot of outrage, but a lot of curiosity. Grange played out their season with them and then traveled through the South and the West, and wherever he went, it was, you know, front page coverage, and, you know, he had the first agent who got him endorsements and got him movie contracts and all that sort of stuff. He was a real phenomenon in professional football because he was the greatest college player of his era who had gone pro. Going pro was something that, you know, a respectable college player had never done before.
You can't believe the letters that I would receive across the country, though, when I started with the Chicago Bears, that football was a college game. It was not to be played for money. Half of my friends would not speak to me. My coach wouldn't speak to me at Illinois for nearly 2 years afterwards. Of course, they forgot that I told my own coach, I said, you coach and get paid for money. He said, what's the difference if I play and get paid after my college career is over?
He was selling out stadiums for the NFL, and he really saved the league in a lot of ways. He goes to the Polo Grounds and sells out the Polo Grounds, and that money really allowed the Maras and the New York Giants to gain a foothold on success.
Before Grange, it was hard to give away tickets to a pro game, and then suddenly, a demand for bigger stadiums. With Pyle as his manager, Red splits the profits 50-50 with the Bears and makes $100,000 in his first year as a pro.
In the 1920s, professional football was not respected as, genuine profession where, the players by definition are the best at what they do. The idea that professional football was inferior to the college game included an assumption that because it was a mercenary game played for money, it couldn't be as good.
These are the fellas they say are pretty good, but I think we're better.
So a game between the New York Giants and Rockne All-Stars was just a match made in heaven.
Don't forget, man, today, we're gonna win.
And then the Giants beat the Notre Dame players handily, and people were shocked. But that wasn't enough to sort of redeem professional football in the public's eye. So professional football, after the Grange phenomenon faded away, continued to sort of hang out in the lower reaches of the American sporting universe. It was viewed on about the same level as professional wrestling. It was a working class sport, played for money and not very much money. And it was for former college players who couldn't find something better to do. So professional football had to develop sort of independently of the college game. And it developed after 1933 when all those small towns lost their franchises and it became strictly a big city league. And then professional football could develop in those big cities, which tended not to have major football playing universities. The New York Giants had Fordham and NYU and Columbia to compete with, while college football continued to dominate in the smaller towns, not the major cities.
Arch Ward was the sports editor of the Chicago Tribune, and not only was he a journalist, he was a great promoter. And he wanted to promote the Tribune, but he wanted to promote Chicago. And remember, this is the 30s when college football is king and the NFL is still somewhat of an afterthought. His idea was to match a college football all-star team of seniors after they graduate against the defending NFL champion.
These boys were all sensations on the college gridirons last season.
It was a huge hit from the get-go.
It's football's Midwestern curtain raiser, the Chicago Tribune charity clash starring the college all-stars.
People were captivated by the idea of measuring the best college players in the game against the pro guys. In a way, the college all-star game helped legitimize pro football in the minds of the public.
The first 6 years, the pros won 2, tied 2, and lost 2. And today we would be shocked by those 2 losses. But at the time, fans were shocked by the 2 wins. How could a mere professional team beat the best college players in the land?
All right, line up. Harmon carrying the ball. He cuts through. Puts in.
Tom Harmon plays in 1941. He's the Heisman Trophy champion. He's had a dominant season.
Thank you very, very much.
He has a great game, of course, in Chicago.
And there's 21 and Harmon passing.
Then what happens? 41, Pearl Harbor. This guy is a pilot in World War II.
I was fortunate. My dad went down twice, once with a faulty distributor and carburetor, and then the second time was in a dogfight in China.
A bullet entered my cockpit, and the shell had blown the gas primer between my legs, blowing my pant legs off at the knees, and inflicting severe burns and starting a gasoline fire.
And he walked out of both of those experiences.
It was an awful long struggle, and it took me 32 days to get back to my home base. That was the toughest yardage that I ever had to make.
And then he comes back in 1945 to play in the same game. This is a 4-year gap.
Tommy Harmon, Air Force hero and All-American from Michigan, tears off precious yards.
His return in 1945 symbolized a lot more than football. The embrace of the crowd was because he being back here is like time stopped. We're going back to 41. You got a split in the film, basically. And we're back to simple pleasures. We're back to recreational stuff. And now we're back to normal living.
The College All-Star Game was a grand meeting. It was kind of the kickoff for the college season.
Don't look now, but the football season is just around the corner. The College All-Stars have just opened their training camp outside Chicago for their game with the Super Bowl winners, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
He's former Notre Dame coach Ara Parsegian in his first football game since he resigned after the 1974 season.
It's a spectacular that's been going on for a number of years. I think it's regaining the prominence that it once enjoyed.
I remember all the guys, we all got together. It was every coach in football there. But I always had a good time. No, I had a good time.
Practice tonight. Closed.
The NFL became the dominant sport in America, and as the competition became increasingly one-sided, the attention that the College All-Star Game drew diminished. You can look at the attendance figures.
65,000 fans are on hand in Soldiers Field, Chicago.
By the 70s, it was in the 50,000 range.
So the last time that game was ever played was in Chicago. It was played for charity.
It was the Pittsburgh Steelers, the defending champion, playing the College All-Stars in 1976. It wasn't much of a game. By then, the pros had pretty much dominated this series, and Pittsburgh was up 24-0.
And this massive thunderstorm broke out at the end of the third quarter.
I don't think I've ever seen it rain this hard at a football game, Frank. I don't believe I've ever seen it rain this hard.
The skies just literally, when you say open up, you couldn't even see the field.
Firing out to Tommy Riemann and a flash of lightning, and believe me, it is coming down. We may have the driest spot in town, but believe me, it's not too dry up here.
The College All-Star Game wasn't really curtailed by a thunderstorm. The players didn't want to play it. The pro teams didn't like the game because it endangered their players.
It was insane when you think about all the knees that could have been torn up.
Archie Griffin, the Heisman Award winner, around the right side, upended by somebody. I really cannot tell you. Yeah, we got some young men out on the field, too. I think they're having a carnival down at the one end of the field.
And then every kid in the place ran down to the field, which was artificial turf, and started sliding on it. And the teams literally fled the field.
I have never seen anything quite like it.
Because all these fans wanted to play, and you had a feeling when you were watching it, they're not going to do this again.
Both teams now have gone in. The officials have left the field. That's the story. 1:22 left in the third quarter. We have understood that the game has been called.
And they didn't. That was the last time they ever played that game.
The proceeding, a presentation of ABC Sports, recognized around the world as the leader in sports television. The other goalpost comes down. Good night.
With victory and peace, one of the largest crowds in the history of the Classic turns out for the Army-Notre Dame game. 75,000 are on hand to pay tribute to these typical American boys, representative of our great armies.
After World War II, football became more enticing for many of the men who served in the service and still had some eligibility in college. They were prepared for battle, they were trained for battle, they were in great shape.
Post-war football for the colleges will be more deceptive, be faster, and will be exceedingly more interesting to both the spectator and player alike.
There was obviously a post-war boom in a lot of different ways, and college football was a beneficiary of that post-war boom. You start to have growth in media, you start to have the advent of television and radio.
Good afternoon, everybody, and Happy New Year. This is Chick Hearn with Mel Allen.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Well, it was interesting because in the 50s, when television first came aboard, the NCAA was concerned about its impact on attendance, concern about maintaining the popularity of the sport so it didn't affect ticket sales.
The NCAA commissioned a study to look at television's impact on college football. And it was a 3-person committee, and they decided that, you know what? Television is bad for college football. If it's available on TV, people won't go to the stadium.
NFL saw the benefit of television and saw a way to capture the imagination of the public in a way that college football took years to figure out.
Friends, we greet you from the office of Bert Bell, Commissioner of the National Football League. Commissioner Bell, some sports dropped off last year, but professional football had their greatest year. How do things look for 54?
Well, Harry, professional football, I think you know, is up 45% in paid attendance since 1946. Last year was the greatest year we ever had in professional football with paid attendance.
For Bert Bell, he recognized that there would need to be a relationship between television and the NFL to make pro football more and more successful.
We expect to have the greatest year and show the greatest football was ever known in the history of the world.
Well, the NFL understood that television could bring their product to more people and make it more attractive to fans and get those fans more interested in pro football than they were, and maybe eventually more interested in pro football than in college football.
65,000 are in Yankee Stadium as the Giants meet the Colts for the Pro Grid Championship. And through the first half, Johnny Unitas has the Cinderella team down in the dumps with his brilliant passing.
In 1958, the so-called greatest game ever played, the Colts and the Giants for the NFL championship, was shown on national TV, and things took off from there.
Connerly connects again. And Gifford carries the ball, and the Colts mill Davis, both over the goal line. The Giants lead 17-14 in the fourth period. Then with the seconds ticking away, Unitas pitches to Berry, part of a brilliant drive for yardage. The Colts are on New York's 13. With only 7 seconds remaining, Steve Myra boots a field goal from the 20, and for the first time, a game goes into sudden death overtime.
This was a new concept to football fans, because colleges just played ties.
Johnny Unitas, the quarterback who couldn't get a job a few years ago, moving the ball to the Giants' 1. There he hands off to Amici. The horse rams across, and the Colts win. One of the most exciting games ever.
Honestly, that game where suddenly it was blazoned into the public's mind that this really was an extraordinary performance. It wasn't now tied up just with the identity with a college. It was a sport in its own right, and it had captivated the attention of the country.
With a great deal of pleasure that I appear here to announce the fact that I am the commissioner of the American Football League.
The American Football League kicks off its second season on ABC.
Pro game changed tremendously in the 1960s when the American Football League came around with 8 teams. When you have that many teams, you're starting to look at a lot more colleges than you did to find players.
Well, the big question seems to be, where are you going to get your players? Well, when you stop and think of the number of college players that there are across the length and breadth of the United States, and the few that have an opportunity to play pro ball, I think that answers itself.
Grambling, Louisiana. Population 3,600. A tiny dot on the map of North Louisiana.
Think back to the 1960s and 70s. How many people knew what state Grambling was in?
Boy, you could hear them laugh, and they would say, Gambling College, or Grumbling College, or what college was that? I said, well, one day you're going to know where Grambling is.
HBCUs were putting out great products on the field, and they were able to send those talents to the AFL.
Charlie Joyner was in the Hall of Fame. Willie Lanier played the year before, was in the Hall of Fame. Frank Lewis, Raymond Chester, HBCUs, and put all these great players, mostly in the AFL. And I think a lot of scouts were there saying, wow.
These are players who helped to revolutionize the game of football. So Buck Buchanan is one of those names that jumps out to you, right? Grambling State great lineman. He was the #1 first pick in the AFL draft, and he came from an HBCU, and that really was kind of like your Negro League of football, because that was the best opportunity for African Americans to be able to, to play professionally, and that became a pipeline. Those guys were pioneers.
Billy Cannon, who was already drafted by the new American Football League, has been drafted today by the National Football League and says he will play with the National League. Now, do you expect to run into that problem very often? You will from time to time, that's for sure. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I think you can say, if I can interject here, these players have got the choice. For the first time in, I guess, 10 years, they have a choice of where they can go play.
What happened was when the AFL came around and the NFL needed to compete with it, found that it needed to go out and scout every avenue to find players. Drafts were held back in December before the bowl games are held, so the teams would have the rights to these players. They can go out and get them. In the AFL, it was kind of like wildfire. There's the famous story of Al Davis, the owner of the Oakland Raiders, signing Fred Biletnikoff after his bowl game underneath the goalpost, having him sign a contract with the Raiders.
Joe Namath, the man with the solid gold arm, hits Ray Perkins with a 20-yard bullet pass, and Alabama pulls closer. Namath has been signed by the New York Jets, and next year he'll be in professional ranks.
Joe Namath was one of the great signings for the AFL, maybe the greatest signing the AFL had. The St. Louis Cardinals had his rights, and he could have gone in the NFL and maybe been a great player there. But he decided to go to the AFL. There were these two entities warring to get your players, and more players are going to have more jobs. That's when pro football started to really surpass college football in a lot of ways.
The Super Bowl. The American Football League champions, the New York Jets, versus the National Football League champions, the Baltimore Colts. Tickets have never been more scarce than they were here in Miami.
For the NFL's first 40 years, it was a minor league damn near for the college game. It was not at all as popular. But in the 60s, you got the AFL joins the NFL. You got the Super Bowl. You got Monday Night Football. And all of a sudden in the 70s and 80s, the NFL goes past college football. It's more entertaining. They have to create their own fan base. The ball is being thrown around like crazy. And all of a sudden, the college game looks slow and boring. And what do you have? You have Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. 10-year war is great, but it's 3 yards and a cloud of dust. And that's not very exciting on TV or from row 70.
The college coaches were not willing to break away from what they had learned.
We find that our best passing teams are not the most winning teams. But if we can balance it up, that'll be fine. If we can't, we'll get back to lugging the football.
Why in the world, if I'm the head coach at Tennessee, why would I not run a single wing? And everybody else ran it, and guess what? All they did was win.
He's in there!
So why in the world would I change that? We built the stadium.
Bounce backpedaling to throw. Sets, fires it down the far side. He's got Winslow at the 40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30. Cut from behind and dropped at the Pittsburgh 22.
The pros were so much more creative offensively because they had to be.
Hard throw. Look at that!
Meanwhile, college is doing what they always did.
Second down and 10 from the 20. And there's Leon Crosslight.
And really the ultimate example at that time, Oklahoma, Barry Switzer, the wishbone, and how they did things.
Out of the wishbone formation.
We were the second team ever to go to the wishbone. Texas was the first. They'd won a national championship with it. We'd play a lot of games, never threw the ball. We pitched the ball. That's what we call passes. 71, we rushed for 472 yards a game for 11 consecutive games. No one runs the ball like that anymore.
That tells us how much time remains here at the third annual Holiday Bowl. The Cougars have a chance.
So even with all the old school values entrenched in the college game, there actually was one outlier, BYU, Lavelle Edwards.
McMahon all the way back in his own 46, throwing for the end zone. Receivers are there, defenders are there. It is in the end zone. Who has the ball? Touchdown! Touchdown!
Lavelle Edwards is one of the great stories of going against the grain.
He was a single wing guy. He was hired to go to BYU because he's the only Mormon that knew how to run the single wing. These are his words. After 1 year, he realizes we can't live this way. The next year, they came back with a completely different playbook.
We're going to work on some fundamentals that we use with our quarterbacks at Brigham Young University to help develop our passing game.
And he goes, all right, they've never seen this before.
Get the ball out to the receiver quickly. Throw. Again, throw. Drop back in the pocket, throw, and then deliver the football.
BYU is slinging it, and it was crazy how much different it was because this was late night, Saturday Night Live, hammer down football.
It was controlled passing. A lot of the passes operated as runs.
It is working the way 3 yards in a cloud of dust used to work.
And you had never seen that before in the college game. It was the birth of West Coast mountain football. You introduce this offense, and you start threatening to change football up there in the mountains. Now you had to pay attention to them.
What's amazing about this is, as a result, BYU becomes the place for a hotshot quarterback to go. It's not USC, and it's not Texas, and it's not Alabama. They're going to Provo.
Over the past number of years, we've had a rich tradition of quarterbacks at BYU.
This is McMahon, this is Young, this is Bosco.
And the numbers were just off the chart.
And I set some goals for myself last year. I wanted to throw at least 3 touchdowns a game and over 300 yards a game, and I exceeded both of those.
Detmore wins a Heisman Trophy, for crying out loud.
The winner of the Heisman Award, Ty Detmer of BYU. Ty Detmer.
And when you start to see them beat the old teams that are running the I formation or the wishbone.
Bosco down the middle. Then he's got Haysbert down there. Haysbert's got it. He's going to score a touchdown for Brigham Young.
The tug of war is gone, and now you've got this razzmatazz happening in 1984.
They got plenty of time to go their way. Third down play. Bosco looking. Scramble. Throws it. Touchdown!
They beat Michigan in the Holiday Bowl in San Diego.
Oh, boy. Brigham Young University has won the Holiday Bowl 24-17. And the Cougars are the only undefeated team in the nation.
They're the national champs. And the old school teams are starting to adjust to this.
The bomb. The bullet over the middle. The button hook along the sidelines. These are the increasingly important weapons in college football's offensive arsenal. They're all part of the passing game.
This is when the offensive explosion started to happen, and it saved college football, quite frankly, because every game looked the same for 50 years, and next thing you know, the pendulum starts to swing.
This is the #1 team in college football, the University of Miami Hurricanes. But on January 2nd, their top spot will be challenged by the Nittany Lions of Penn State, ranked #2.
If you were ever on the sideline with those Miami teams in the 80s, that was a pro sideline. They were a pro program at Miami. Jimmy Johnson's advantage over a lot of other coaches was his ability to identify talent.
Jimmy's philosophy was all about speed at every position.
Hot, and this could be 6. Irvin will score.
Speed was always so important. I wanted fast players when I coached. I didn't want the big 260-pound linebacker. I wanted the 195, 200-pounder that could run like a deer. And then we were a very aggressive offense. You know, it was not 3 yards and a cloud of dust. We were throwing the ball all over the field.
Irvin is open. Touchdown, Miami. He's a national championship coach.
We were winning national championships, and people would say, man, I bet the Hurricanes could beat the Dolphins. And we might have thought in our minds that we actually could. But in all reality, everybody's good in the professional game. Well, no, we maybe could have beat the Dolphins.
The Nebraskas and the Oklahomas, they started changing and going away from some of the bigger players, going to the fast players because we beat them so much. Then when I went to Dallas, I had the same philosophy.
Jimmy, why don't you run for governor?
Made a big difference. A lot of times in college, you're kind of a father figure. You've got a lot of, counseling that you do with the player. In professional football, it's how much money are you going to pay me? You're dealing with the agent.
In pro ball, they don't have alumni. In colleges, they do have graduates, you have alumni, you have student body. So there is a different feel on campus. There's a different loyalty feeling, and there's pride in going back to your campus, your school, and your children are there, and then your relatives are there. And it's a great feeling to have that home, that attachment to institutions.
You go into professional football, it's a job.
I think there's a lot of things about college football that are still very unique to college football, all the tradition, all the pageantry. What's interesting is that the on-field versions of the sport have never been closer than they are today.
The height of the college game was producing a particular kind of athlete that did not fit with the pro system. The pushback from the pros was, you need to adapt to us. And then college looked over and said, no, you can kiss my ass. Like, this works on college. We don't care. These kids are successful.
Stays on his feet, heaving one downfield for a first down.
Quarterbacks like Pat Mahomes, like Baker Mayfield, these guys played in offenses that the NFL would never have taken seriously. That gimmicky stuff you run, those spread offense things you do in college, they're not going to work in the NFL.
Are you
Now we see NFL teams, hiring college coaches specifically to run the offense they ran in college. The fact that the Arizona Cardinals would hire Cliff Kingsbury as their head coach after he got fired by Texas Tech for not winning enough games tells you, whereas they once mocked that kind of offense, now hey, come on up here and install that offense for us. These two sports have never been closer together.
Direct snap to Ellington. Hopkins throws to Boyd.
And they're going to snap it, and it's Trey Burton who throws caught. Foles, touchdown.
It's a dream come true. You grow up, you dream of playing in the NFL. You dream of hearing your name called on draft day.
Commissioner has the call.
The San Francisco 49ers.
St. Louis Rams.
Miami Dolphins.
The Houston Texans.
The Dallas Cowboys. The Minnesota Vikings.
The New York Jets are selected.
First choice in the first round.
Initially, one of the reasons the draft came about was a double signing. The double signing involved Don Hutson, who was one of the great players of all time. He signed 2 contracts. He signed one with the Green Bay Packers and one with New York. So they said, I think we got to do something about it.
Burt Bell, who was the commissioner of the NFL, was seeing some issues with the league. They had free agency at that time, not in the way we view it now, but everything was fair game. Who could go to the highest bidder, like the Bears grabbing up, Red Grange back in the day.
After this, of course, the bidding wars stopped because I have your rights. And like baseball, there's no free agency for decades, so we've got a closed monopoly, basically, which is a very smart way to run a business. And that is why Burt Bell was way ahead of his time and thought of the draft, the first sport to have it.
Every coach in the National Football League has his fingers crossed and his hopes high as the drafting of college players gets underway in Philadelphia.
Everybody had a stack of newspapers, and they had the Street and Smith football magazine and rolls of quarters. And people would go over to the telephone and they'd call Pappy Lewis, who was the head coach at West Virginia at the time. And Pappy, we're looking for a tackle. Who's the best tackle that you played against, or you got anybody on your team?
There weren't scouting departments. There weren't, people going on the road to watch kids. A lot of it was, hey, did you see this kid? He scored 4 touchdowns. Look, read the newspaper clipping. He was first-team All-American tackle. He must be good. Let's draft him.
The idea of going out and measuring times, that took years for that science to develop. Early on, it was really almost a grab bag.
Archie Manning, who has 1 touchdown running, he has thrown another, the last 2 stuttered.
I played my last college game on January 2nd in the Gator Bowl. A little over 3 weeks later was the NFL draft.
The National Football League selection meeting is now in session.
Then the sports information director at Ole Miss called me. I went to the athletic office at 9 o'clock, and at 9:15, the Saints called.
New Orleans Saints select on the first round quarterback Archie Manning, University of Mississippi.
An AP photographer came in and took my picture, and I went to a 10 o'clock class. So that was my draft day. There was no combine. There was no interviews. So, yes, it's changed quite a bit.
Next up, Los Angeles Rams selects on the first round running back Eric Dickerson of SMU.
For decades, the NFL and the NCAA had a nice relationship because players would play their 4 years of eligibility, or at least use up their 4 years of eligibility before they would move into the pros. And the NFL wouldn't take players who did not serve their full time.
And then Herschel Walker came along from the University of Georgia. And guess what? 3 years at Georgia, NFL was still honoring the 4-year deal, but there was an alternative called the USFL.
Herschel, if you had your time to do over it again, would you make the same decision?
Yes, I think I made the same decision because I'm happy where I'm at, and I think I've matured a great deal as an individual and as an athlete.
Now the NFL's saying, well, if they're going to leave early, what are we thinking sitting here saying, nope, can't come to our league for 4 years?
The NFL wised up and said, you know what, 3 years, we're good, you're allowed to leave early.
Jerome Bettis, running back, Pittsburgh Steelers.
In terms of my eligibility,
I decided to forego my senior year because I cannot afford to hurt my potential NFL career. Coach Holtz, having seen NFL players, he knew that I was ready. That was a confirmation that I needed to go to the next level.
You know, over time, we always talk about commerce of anything, right? So college football, we know it's big business.
This game will sell merchandise. It will create interest for tickets back home. It'll hopefully get other networks bidding for these opportunities for us.
The big one now is paying the players.
Hundreds of players in the college game earn millions for their schools, but in many cases, don't have enough pocket money for pizza on Friday night.
Should players get paid? There's a very obvious argument for it, because who isn't getting paid?
The Dabo Swinney's new deal today pays him $93 million.
When a defensive coordinator or a position coach at certain schools can make more than $1 million, far more than the president of the university, you see how tilted things have become.
If they are helping make the money, they deserve that money.
These are full-time jobs. Fair to say?
Oh, yeah.
Full-time.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is a full-time job. Those games that you're going to face, it's going to take a toll on you.
But where do we draw the line? Is it only players who are making money for their schools who get paid? Is it every college football player that gets paid? Is it every athlete on a campus that gets paid?
If you play football at a Power 5 school, your lifestyle is not that of a normal college student. You don't have any student loans to worry about if you're on scholarship. You don't have to worry about eating food. You have tutors. You have resources available to you that your rank and file college student does not have. That's a fact.
Now, you can argue about the fairness of whether a scholarship is enough, but don't say to me they're not getting anything to play. They're getting a wonderful, valuable asset, a college education.
So at some point, university presidents and the athletic directors and the coaches, who are all doing pretty well financially, they are completely caught off guard when these athletes are trying to use their program to just get to the NFL.
Christian McCaffrey not going to play in the Sun Bowl. Presumably this is to prevent injury as he gets ready for his NFL career.
And I think what we began to see is players not wanting to subject themselves to injury risk and anything that was going to really jeopardize their earning potential.
I hate it, but I understand it. It's a selfish decision, but with the money that's at stake for all these players now, I understand why they would do it. But what are you going to do? You can't force guys to play.
You know, Christian McCaffrey was criticized for sitting out of the Sun Bowl. It wasn't like it was the sugar or the rose or the cotton, okay? You know, you're on the cusp of $1 million career. If you feel like you've fulfilled your obligation, you feel like you've done as best as you possibly could, then why not say, hey guys, you know, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've definitely fulfilled the terms of my scholarship and my agreement here.
The Carolina Panthers have selected Christian McCaffrey.
You know, I'm done.
Discipline's important. Play fast, not left.
Hit at the goal line. Bosa got there in a hurry.
I think what happened at Ohio State in 2018 with Nick Bosa, I think could be a watershed moment.
And Bosa pointing to an area of the body where you don't want to get hit.
That could be a groin. There's a moment there for athletes to step back and say, look, there's no reason for me to rush coming back from injury or surgery when I've got to worry about the career that's in front of me.
Ohio State defensive end Nick Bosa has opted to leave Ohio State to rehab and prepare for the draft.
I think Bosa honestly thought that I've got to worry about the career that will pay for myself and for my family to live, you know, theoretically for the rest of our lives.
Jackson keeps it again, trying to stretch to the edge. What a hurdle by Jackson! Highlight reel touchdown!
Some people now, they're watching college football only through the lens of thinking, like, what is this guy going to do on the next level?
I haven't seen anybody in college football with his type of accuracy. I think that does translate to the next level.
Where will this kid go in the draft? How does he rank amongst the best running backs coming up? Will he be 1? Will he be 5? Will he be this? Will he be that? We didn't watch the games that way before. But now it's about the combines, the pro days, the draft itself. How many underclassmen are going to enter the NFL draft? 135 put their names in 2019. All 135 are not going to make it in the league. But some of them just like, you know something? I'm just ready.
Kyler Murray has chosen to enter the NFL draft.
Listen, you want to know how much college football has changed over the course of its history? The first Heisman Trophy winner did not go on to have an NFL career, a pro football career. Jay Berwanger went on to normal life. Can you ever envision or imagine the best college football player doing anything else but immediately taking the next semester off, hiring the agent, hiring the personal strength and conditioning coach, going down to the Senior Bowl and having press conferences, ramping up with nonstop coverage for the Scout Combine in Indianapolis, having his personal doc series leading up to the NFL draft, and then walking into the NFL draft with an entourage as if he's Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather?
We officially welcome the next generation of players. Odell Beckham, LSU. Kyler Murray, Oklahoma. Nick Bosa, Ohio State. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback, California. Christian Wilkins, Clemson.
Devin Bush, linebacker, Michigan.
Todd Gurley, Georgia. Trent Richardson, Matt Khalil, Robert Griffin III.
Seattle Seahawks select Shaquille Griffin.
There should be no problem with college football being a feeder for the NFL. College campuses are feeders for all kinds of professions. You should let kids major in football.
The relationship between college football and the NFL, a lot of things aren't written down. There are no contracts signed that say, college football, NFL, this is how we work together. It changes over time. College football's gonna thrive no matter what.
I love the NFL, but it's not the same. It's not where your dad went to school or where your mom went to school or where your granddad played back in the day. Yes, you're rooting for laundry, but damn it, it's your laundry, right? It's your alma mater. It's part of your blood.
The NFL has, in many ways, outstripped college football. It's a $10 billion enterprise at least. And yet, college football is still incredibly strong. What's the difference? We're attached to this. It's the passion. It's the pageantry. It's the idea that all these guys have chosen to be there. And if that is no longer true, what are you cheering? It's the faith of millions of fans is what you're messing with.